Welcome back to the channel. Settle in, because we're about to take a deep dive into the extraordinary journey of Dana Perino, a story that will challenge everything you thought you knew about this familiar face from your television screen. What unfolds here isn't just a career retrospective, but a masterclass in reinvention, a testament to quiet resilience, and ultimately a revelation about where real influence gets built when the cameras stop rolling. This is about the farm girl who carried eggs at dawn, who grew up to carry the torch for truth in American journalism, and the surprising detours that made all the difference. Let's start where all great stories begin, at the beginning. Picture the rolling plains of Kansas in the 1980s, where a young Dana Perino woke before sunrise not to check social media or watch cartoons, but to gather eggs from the family's chicken coop. The smell of hay and livestock hanging in the morning air as she carefully placed each warm egg into cartons that would later be delivered to neighbors. This was where her understanding of hard work took root. Not as some abstract concept, but as the tangible reality of blisters on her palms from hauling feed buckets in the winter cold. Her father, a volunteer firefighter whose pager could erupt at any hour, taught her that service wasn't something you did when convenient. Her mother, grading papers at the oilcloth-covered kitchen table after dinner, demonstrated daily how knowledge could be both weapon and shield. These weren't just childhood chores and parental examples. They were the first building blocks of what would become an extraordinary professional ethos. When Dana left for the University of Colorado, not Denver, as often mistakenly reported, she carried with her that unique hybrid of prairie pragmatism and intellectual curiosity. While other students partied, she could often be found in the library, poring over political theory texts, but always circling back to one fundamental question: how does one communicate essential truths without distortion or agenda? This wasn't academic navel-gazing. It was the beginning of what would become her life's work. Her internship at the White House under President George H.W. Bush became the proving ground for these early musings. Where others saw the internship as primarily a networking opportunity, Dana approached it differently. She became a student of the briefing room itself, watching how seasoned journalists parsed statements, noting which questions cut through, political spin, observing how language could illuminate or obscure. When a senior aide once mocked her flat Midwest vowels, she didn't get defensive. She got to work, spending hours each week practicing elocution in front of her dorm room mirror, determined to ensure her message would never be dismissed because of how she delivered it. Fast forward to 2005, when Dana Perino stepped into one of the most pressure-filled roles in American politics as White House press secretary under President George W. Bush. At just 33 years old, she wasn't just one of the youngest to ever hold the position. She was navigating a post-9/11 media landscape more complex and fractious than any her predecessors had faced. The briefing room became her crucible. There's a moment she still recalls vividly, being grilled about agricultural subsidies while cameras rolled and reporters waited for any slip-up. "I could feel the heat rising in my face," she later confessed. "But I clung to those policy details like they were porch railings in a Kansas tornado." What's telling isn't that she remembers the moment of pressure, but what was on her desk that day, a dog-eared copy of Strunk and White's The Elements of Style, bookmarked beside her briefing binders. For Dana, clarity wasn't just a professional asset. It was a moral imperative, the intellectual equivalent of her father running into burning buildings when others ran out. Then, at what most would consider the peak of her influence and visibility, Dana did something that stunned Washington. She walked away, not to a lucrative cable news contract or some high-profile lobbying firm, but to a classroom at Johns Hopkins University, where she enrolled in a master's program in diplomacy. For 3 years, she traded press scrums for Arabic flashcards, political strategy sessions for vaccine distribution negotiations in West Africa. This wasn't a sabbatical. It was a deliberate dismantling and rebuilding of her entire approach to communication. In Senegal, working on polio immunization campaigns, she had an epiphany watching mothers line up for hours to get their children vaccinated. "That taught me more about persuasion than any White House media strategy ever could," she'd later reflect. The experience fundamentally rewired how she understood her role as a communicator, not just delivering messages, but bridging divides, finding common language where none seemed to exist. When she returned to television in 2011 as a Fox News contributor and later co-host of The Five, the difference was palpable. Viewers expecting a partisan attack dog encountered something far more dangerous: a moderator who asked questions about solutions rather than sound bites, who disarmed opponents with a combination of Kansas charm and razor-sharp follow-ups. The pawn, Dana Perino, who came back from her diplomatic detour, had developed what might be her most powerful skill: the ability to explain complex issues without dumbing them down, to disagree without demeaning, to challenge without contempt. Ratings soared, but more importantly, the nature of the conversations changed. Producers began noticing something remarkable. When Dana moderated segments, the online comments sections, normally a cesspool of vitriol, would actually contain substantive exchanges between viewers of different political stripes. Just when it seemed she'd reached the pinnacle of media success, Dana shocked the industry again by stepping back from daily television in 2022 to launch what may become her most enduring legacy, the Press for Truth initiative. While national media remains obsessed with ratings and clickbait, Dana's team operates in places most journalists never visit, like Macon, Georgia, where they trained local reporters on untangling school board budgets, or North Dakota, where they provided legal support to a small paper fighting for body cam footage that exposed police misconduct. This isn't some feel-good side project. It's a strategic intervention at what Dana sees as the most vulnerable point in America's information ecosystem. Local newsrooms are the canaries in our democratic coal mine, she explains. When they weaken, corruption grows in the dark. The numbers bear her out. Since its quiet launch, Press for Truth has trained over 1,200 journalists across 30 states, created a 24/7 legal hotline for reporters under threat, and helped secure the release of public documents that exposed everything from environmental violations to misuse of education funds. Now here's the question worth sitting with. What eggs are you carrying today? What seemingly ordinary experiences or values that might actually be preparing you for something far greater tomorrow? Because if Dana Perino's journey shows us anything, it's that the road to meaningful influence rarely looks like we expect, and the tools we need are often already in our hands.